Hello and welcome to this week's Weekly Reading Wednesday. I'm Emma Turton and I'm a medical intuitive. And this week I want to speak about a really juicy topic that is explored and spoken very loudly about in many different circles, from psychology to doctors to divorcees to all different people in the world, about the influence of the narcissist on sensitive people. So if you identify as an empath or a highly sensitive person, or you feel that your life has been influenced by a narcissistic personality, or if somebody has labelled you as a narcissist, then this video is for you. So I invite you to come and explore this with me, because there is a special bond and a special relationship that happens between the narcissist and the empath. And this is something that is generally not spoken about. Often the narcissist is demonized in society as being the cause of all evil. And I want to speak about that in a moment, but I would like to actually also bring in some of the definitions of these terms, because we do throw them around. Hi, Karen. We do throw them around. We may identify as being an empath or a narcissist, and we may see one as good and one as evil, and that may depend on which side of that fence we sit. So I would like to just talk about what I mean by narcissist and what I mean by empath, just so that we're on the same page. So a narcissist is a person, generally they're defined as the person who has a very excessive interest or admiration of themselves. So Narcissus was, I think it was Greek mythology, I'm not sure, correct me on that if I'm wrong, was cast out by the gods and sentenced to a life without human contact. And he so craved love that he fell in love with his own reflection in a pool of water. And he so fell in love with that reflection of himself in the pool of water, because he craved that human contact so much, that he actually starved to death looking at himself and his own reflection. And that's where the name narcissist comes from Narcissus. And so, oh, hi, Aunt. Nice to see you too. And so thank you so much for joining me live. I really appreciate all these beautiful people coming and joining me live today. And so what that is, so when it comes to the narcissist, they generally are, for those of you who have come into contact with them, you'll know that they are often very charming, very charismatic, very personable people. They seem to own the whole room when they walk in, and they appear to have a very strong personality, although often that belies an underlying lack of a solid core in their personality, or a real strength of self-esteem. And so that often they sometimes, so these people often are the ones who manage to revert every conversation to themselves, and they seem to be able to really work the room in a way that it seems like they may not always be extroverts, they may be introverts, but they tend to have a specific type of personality. And when it gets to the extreme, that narcissistic personality disorder is when that particular personality type, that slightly self-centered or egocentric personality type, becomes dysfunctional in life. So it starts to damage relationships and ability to function in life. And that's what's labelled narcissistic personality disorder, but that's the extreme end. So what I see when I see somebody who is labelled, and this is a label, this doesn't mean that they are stuck with this particular personality type. Anybody who has ever been labelled a narcissist, it's not a personality disorder. From what I see, it's actually an energetic issue. There is an imbalance in the energy field. There is an imbalance in our ability to contain our energy, in an ability to know where we end and others begin. And generally, the energy field of a person who would be labelled a narcissist, it feels very far-reaching. It feels like it's got long arms that reach out to absorb any available energy that is nearby, to help suck that in, to stabilise themselves. So there is like a vortex, like a hole inside that needs this energy brought in, because it's not being built up from within. And so that's quite a different sort of thing. It's not a disorder in terms of a personality. It's actually an energetic imbalance, which can become chronic. And so an empath, when I'm talking about an empath, and some people call them highly sensitive people, although there are slight differences. The empath is a slightly more extended version of the highly sensitive person. They're a person who's highly sensitive to the mental or emotional states of other people. So they are often very aware of the atmosphere in a room. They're often very heightened awareness of how somebody else is feeling, and often more concerned about how someone else is feeling than how they are feeling, and perhaps more in tune with how other people are feeling, and even starting to emote through other people simply by their nature. And so they're often they're described as naturally giving. They are often spiritually attuned or are really good listeners. They're the people that you go to when you have a crisis, because they're the people who will be there to energetically support you when you need that support. They're often a chameleon because they change shape a little bit. They change depending on the circumstances and energy of the room and the people around them. So they will often shapeshift a little bit. And what that looks like to me, again, is that it's not necessarily a personality type that you are an empath. And I have a lot of people who are who identify as empaths that work with me or that follow me as well. And yes, I myself have identified as an empath as well. But what I see when we are really allowing ourselves to go fully into that state is that we have this free-flowing energy out in all directions, often with no filter, often with no limits, and we don't pick and choose where our energy goes. So we feel like we are being drained. And often that is the case. The empath will often feel like there is this energetic drain, and what that has is this shrinking effect on their own energy centers, this shrinking effect, particularly around the throat, particularly around the solar plexus, but there's this shrinking effect of their own ability to fill up their energy field in those areas because they're leaking constantly outwards, and we never are being our energy is never stolen. We never have vampirism or people sucking our energy out without us giving permission. And that may be at a subconscious level, but we allow it to flow out. We choose to let it go there. And so what happens is between the empath and the narcissist is this special bond, because the empath has all this free-flowing energy outwards that they give willingly, often without even realizing what they're doing. And the narcissist has these really long arms reaching out going, I need some energy. I feel unstable. And they feel the energy of the empath. They draw it in. They feel nourished. They feel filled up, and they feel this fit. And so does the empath. So there is this attraction between the two personality types. And this isn't always a romantic attraction. Sometimes this is a friendship attraction. So this may be people you work with. This may be friends. This may be a partner or an ex-partner. But you may understand this in the same way, because what happens is it feels right, and it can feel really good to begin with, because energetically you're propping up each other's weaknesses. Energetically you fit into the holes created by your own energy field, and you fit into the holes in the other person's field, they fit into yours, and it fills you both up like Lego pieces slotting together. And that creates an issue, because as Caroline May says, that she describes that as a power addiction on both sides of that dynamic. So the narcissist is addicted to taking the power from somebody else because it fills that need in them. They are incapable of not taking the power when it is there, because it is offered so freely. They must have it because they are struggling with their own power at that level. But the empath is addicted to the feeling that they get when they are in that other person's power. They allow themselves to be given over to the point they barely make decisions in that relationship, whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship. They stop making their own decisions. They allow someone else to choose for them, speak for them. Even they start dressing the same. They start acting in a way that will please the narcissist, because that's what they feel they need to do to keep in that energy field. And anyone who has been in that kind of relationship will know that when that relationship, whether it's a friendship or not, when that ends, it feels like you've had a giant gaping wound that has been ripped open. It's not like a normal friendship ending or a normal relationship ending. It feels like you've had all of your limbs ripped from your body, and it is almost the same in your energy field. That's what it looks like. And so you have to then from that point forward start to build yourself up again, regardless of which side you are on, whether you are the narcissist or the empath, because they are both equally imbalanced in different ways that just happen to tessellate, that just happen to fit together. And so when that is wrenched apart, they both feel the wound very acutely, more so than if a friendship ends or a relationship ends with people who aren't having those same imbalances in their energy field. So this is a very different dynamic to a normal relationship, to a relationship between two people who don't have these particular imbalances. And this is why there is this magnetic attraction between these two personality types. This is why you may keep meeting the same people in your life and going, why is everybody the same? Why are they all narcissists? Why do I keep attracting this? Or why do I keep meeting these really sensitive people who don't seem to have an opinion, who don't seem to know what they want to eat for dinner, who don't seem to care if they go to a movie or go to the theatre? Why don't they seem to know who they are and what they want? Why are they constantly just, beige and blending in with me? And so that is we may wonder why we're attracting that. That's why. Because those personality types, those energy types are filling up what we are lacking in ourselves. So what we need to do is start to fill out our own energy field from both sides. So the narcissistic side, so they need to work on that, filling their own energy field, but knowing their limits to where their energy field ends and where others begin, because until they know those limits, they cannot fill back up from within. And it is breaking the addiction to the power of others and learning to harness their own power from within that will break the cycle for them. And for the empath, learning to fill up more so from within with themselves and know where they need to end and where they need to draw their energy back from is incredibly important. They need to know their own boundaries in that way. They need to reaffirm their own boundaries, and that is a constant process they will need to go through. Now, I also there's a third type in here that's really important, and I call this the fluxer or the shapeshifter. The fluxer is the person who fluxes from empath to narcissist as they move through their lives. So they may lean on an empath in the same way a narcissist would to suck up their power and then move on to sit in the basking glow of another narcissist who just happens to be a little bit more down the spectrum of narcissism than them. And they may bask in that glow for a while, soak up that power from them in that way, be thoroughly drawn in by them, hand over all their money and do all the things that the empath does. And then they, at some point, will shift back and be the narcissist again and do that to somebody else. So, and that is a separate type of person who is going through this. And again, that isn't a personality disorder. Again, that is an energetic disorder. That is not knowing and filling our own boundaries. They're fluxing from one extreme to another of needing to draw in energy from within and needing to draw in energy from without, and not actually able to sit in their own field and know who they are, because they need somebody else always to let them know who they are. Because that's the thing. With narcissism, we're always looking for our self-worth in the reflection of another. We're looking for our own self-esteem, for love for ourselves in the eyes of another person, in the same way that Narcissus was looking for his reflection in the pool of water. And so that's what's happening, is the empath is the perfect reflector. And that's why they're so well attracted. Because the narcissist wants that reflection, and the empath is giving it to everybody, reflecting to everybody. So until the empath learns to not just reflect, but to also be the light, to also be who they are in the world and know themselves very well and know their own limits and boundaries very well. And until the narcissist learns to look within for love, to look within for power, to not be looking for that reflection in another, then this will be a constant repeating cycle in each of their lives, not necessarily with the same empath or narcissist, but with more and more of them as they go through their lives. So if you have repeatedly met that same person, if you have repeatedly found yourself feeling like the victim of a narcissist or the victim of people with no personality or the way it seems, then you are repeating that cycle because you have not yet found your boundaries or how to maintain them. And I mean that as energetic boundaries, those social, emotional, mental, psychological boundaries. We need to explore that within ourselves. And I can see there's lots of comments here, so I'm just going to scroll through the comments. Facebook shows them to me in a very strange order, so I apologize if I miss anything. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining me live. It's so beautiful to see you all here again. And Ange says, absolutely, my grandmother and mother were typically struggling with boundaries and huge energy vampires. Yes, it is definitely a boundary issue. Absolutely. And you totally agree with me. That's wonderful. I love hearing that. Thank you. And I'm really glad that this resonates, because I think this is something that's spoken about very wrongly by many quite prominent people, and people are demonized in this process, and it's seen as a personality disorder. But what it is a misunderstanding. And that misunderstanding is that we actually do have this interesting bond that brings the empath and the narcissist together, and that it's understanding the needs in that bond and understanding what those needs are separately, so that they no longer need that bond and create such a dysfunctional relationship. And yes, the empath always gives permission for their energy to be taken. That is absolutely true. It is always a choice. We always have a choice. We always give permission. We may not always realize that's what we have done, but it is never a one-sided story. It is never one person has been the victim of the other, particularly in this empath-narcissist relationship. It may appear that way from the outside, but that's not what's happening. It's absolutely not the case. There are equal things at play here, and there is equal responsibility with the giving and receiving of energy, always. And yes, it is on both sides. Ange says, as a child, I feel it is slightly different. Yes, I agree. As a child, it is very different, because a child is vulnerable. A child is someone that needs to be protected from these energetic drains and be protected because they are vulnerable. And that's the case in anything with a child. A child is the same as animals. They are not able, I don't mean that children are animals, but I mean that they are not able to speak for themselves, and they are not able to protect themselves because they don't know what the world holds for them. They don't know where the dangers are. And that's where our responsibility as adults comes in, that we are able to really guide our children through these things, and to be able to ideally help them to navigate parents or other family members or brothers and sisters or other people in their lives that may be perhaps broaching or breaching these energetic boundaries with these children. So I absolutely agree, it is different as a child. And yes, the demonizing and shaming of the narcissist is happening world over by highly qualified professionals and specialists, saying that that it's borderline personality disorder, that there's really nasty people that are trying to bring you down. And honestly, that's not my experience. It is simply an energetic dysfunction. It's an energetic issue that can be resolved. Absolutely. On both sides of that fence, there is responsibility. And on both sides of that relationship, there is responsibility. And it can be resolved on both sides. It's not something that either party is stuck with, but it may mean that those two people together are not a good fit. It may mean that those two people together, whether they're friends or they're romantically involved, it may be that is not an ideal, healthy relationship for them, and that they may need to leave that relationship, or they may need to work separately on their stuff to be able to support each other in a way that's not hurtful and dysfunctional, because it affects our health. And as I said, it's generally around the throat area and the solar plexus. So we struggle with our voice, we struggle with recurrent throat infections, we struggle with thyroid, we struggle with neck injury and pain and potentially headaches, we struggle with digestive disorders, we struggle with issues in the liver and issues in the bowel, we struggle with anything that happens in our stomach. These things are the areas that will affect our health when we are stuck in this kind of a relationship and it becomes dysfunctional. And Karen says, I've been told that as an empath that I see these relationships. I've been told as an empathic that I seek these relationships. Yes, absolutely. So I don't mean that, yes, you seek these relationships, but what happens is that they feel right because of that magnetic attraction between the two different energy types, because one energy is out reaching for anything it can get hold of for stability, almost like the tripod and the camera, it's reaching out in all directions to just draw energy and power from around it, from those who are willing to offer it up. So the empath offers up the power to the narcissist that's reaching for stability from somebody else's power because they feel they lack it within. And the empath is openly offering up that power. Somebody needs me, and it's not a conscious thing, but it fits really well because one needs and one gives, and it becomes a dysfunctional relationship in that way. So becoming aware as an empath of your boundaries and becoming aware of what that means for you in terms of where you need to do the work to know where you end and where others begin, and where to draw your energy back from, and know when it's flowing to somewhere that you haven't really made a conscious choice about, to know when you're allowing it to go there, and to be able to recognize somebody else's energy when they are reaching into yours. To be able to recognize that as an empath is a very powerful position to be in, because you can see it, you can honor it, you can respect it, and you can say, no, thank you, not today. So it gives you a much more powerful position to be in when forming those relationships. And it's less like being the victim or actively seeking out a self-destructive relationship, and more like being able to know who you are, what you are worth, and what you would like to give the world and what you wouldn't, and whether or not you have the reserve for that today. It's much more of a conscious, intentional decision, and a much more powerful place. And yes, you have all of these symptoms. So you do identify, Karen. Yes, absolutely. It's difficult. It's tricky. And On says, I had quite a few friends who claimed to be empaths, but who ended up on the other side of the spectrum. They delusioned themselves into thinking they were the victims. Absolutely. Yes. And that's that fluxing personality as well. So that fluxing personality can be the empath, can be the narcissist, and they tend to swap between the two. So yes, they will be an empath, and with the shrunken self-esteem, the shrunken ability to express themselves, and with the need to sit under the shelter of somebody else's power for a while. And then they will also reach out to get the power from outside to bring it in, as the narcissist does. So they will flux from one to the other. And any empath that has been through a very traumatic experience, a very, very traumatic experience with a narcissist, is the most at risk of becoming the narcissist, because they have had so much of that energy drawn out of them. They've given it willingly. It's not been taken from them. They've given it willingly, that they feel there's nothing left. So they then need to reach out and draw that energy back in. And they do that by reaching into those who are willingly offering it, which is other empaths. So that's why that is that special circumstance where the empath does become the narcissist. And that is still a dysfunctional energy field. It is still going to be causing them physical problems. It's still going to be causing them life problems, and still going to be causing them relationship problems. And Ange says, I'm so glad I broke the pattern and no longer attract these kind of people. Wonderful. That's so good to hear. Me too. It's really exciting, isn't it? And maybe that is why I'm nervous around spiritual people. Yes, because there's a lot of ego in spiritual people, and there's also a lot of that energetic reaching that goes on in spiritual circles. Often there are people who do it intentionally, will energetically reach because they know what they're doing. They're aware of their energy field, but they don't realize that it's coming from that place of not having anything inside, not having that fullness within their own energy field. So they may be, or they may know well and truly, but they are reaching out into others' energy fields, and they can see quite clearly who's willing to give their energy. So yes, I agree. It can be something that we become wary of, and I myself have become a little more wary of that too through my experiences. It's quite interesting. And oh, hi Leah, nice to see you. And wonderful, Karen, you're better at this now. Putting boundaries in place. Yes, boundaries are so important. As Robert Frost said, good fences make good neighbours. And it's not that we're putting up a defensive fence. We're actually putting up our own boundaries around ourselves so that we know where we end and where the world begins. Unless we know that, we can be leaking all over the place. And we don't want that. We don't want that at all, because that's really bad for our health, and it's really bad for us as humans. We feel horrendous when that happens. And Barbara, I freaking love being an empath. Awesome. But one who knows my own self-worth and boundaries. Yes, that is so powerful, because it's good to be an empath when you know your boundaries. And you love teaching mums to recognise the empath abilities their kids have so they can empower them. Yes, because so many children are empathic naturally, and often they don't know how to deal with that, or they may be so vulnerable to the moods and emotions of the teachers that they have at school, or the other adults in their lives, or the other children and what they're struggling with, that they really struggle to navigate their way through childhood and teenagerdom. It can be really difficult for them if they don't have somebody who they can use as a mentor and a guide who actually knows their own boundaries and isn't taking advantage of their empath children. Absolutely. I think it's wonderful work that you're doing, Barbara. And yes, that's absolutely a cycle. And yes, so much spiritual ego out there. Oh, it's overwhelming sometimes. It's really interesting. And often that just comes with the experience of watching things unfold. But I welcome any questions on this, because this is a different perspective. I realize this is really quite different, that this is not what other people are saying about the empaths and the narcissists. And I have to remind you that we often like to label, as humans, we like to label things as good and bad, good and evil, dark and light. And there is no such thing, to be honest, when it comes to this sort of stuff. Narcissists are not evil. They are simply energetically imbalanced in the same way, similarly, but not the same, as an empath can also have that energetic imbalance, which is why they can end up in that dysfunctional friendship or dysfunctional relationship. So I invite you to keep this conversation going. Thank you, Karen. I'm glad you found this awesome info. And I really am looking forward to hearing about your experiences. And often we do have these experiences when they're very fresh. It can be harder to see them in this light. So if you're dealing with issues perhaps with a narcissist in your life at the moment, this may be something that you will need to re-listen to in a little while. So bookmark this video and come back to it when you're ready to hear this information, because when it's incredibly fresh or you're still going through it right now, it may be much harder for you to process this information, but it is vital for you more than anyone else. So I invite you to do that, to bookmark this and come back to it when you're ready. Because it is harder to hear this stuff, harder to hear that we are not fully the victim and they are not evil when it is very fresh. Because that's actually not what's happening. They are not evil. You are not the victim. It is a dynamic that's created between two energetic types that are dysfunctional, that are leaking, or taking energy from another. So I invite you to keep this conversation going and let me know what experience you've had as an empath or with an empath, what experience you've had. Have you been labelled as a narcissist? Have you been through a relationship with a narcissist only to discover they've turned around and said you're one? Which one of you is right? There's been some very interesting stories that I've heard. There's whole businesses set up to support people through divorcing narcissists. There are whole psychology branches that are devoted to narcissistic personality disorder, and I really don't agree that it is a disorder. Yes, of course, if something is making your life dysfunctional, then they need to look at that, but it really is an energetic imbalance, and it's looking at the causes of that energetic imbalance that will fix this problem, that will actually repair the energy field and allow these people to live a normal life and to function and have healthy relationships once more. So I invite you to keep this conversation going. Let me know what your experiences are with a narcissist or with an empath, or which one you identify with, whether or not you may even be the fluxer that moves from one to the other. Explore this with yourself this week, because this is a powerful topic for transformation. Thank you so much for joining me live. I really appreciate having this beautiful audience to talk to today, and I hope you have a beautiful day. Bye.